Hello! Today I wanted to give you an update on my overwintering process for the pepper plants that I pulled out at the end of September. First of all, I want to thank you all so much for watching that video, for commenting, for liking, for subscribing to me. It was definitely one of my most successful videos. I am just glad that you enjoyed following me on this process. I know it was only the beginning. You only saw how I'm getting my pepper plants started for all of this, and I wanted to give you an update on how it's going. Not everything went according to what I had planned and had hoped for in the beginning of all this. And I want to talk you through what I did right, what I did wrong, why things sort of went awry, and what I hope to do better next time I try this, because I definitely want to be trying this out again. First off, let me give you a quick recap of how I started this whole overwintering process. I had several pepper plants growing out in the hoop house. They got a late start. We didn't get the hoop house up and fully done until later on in the season, so they didn't produce so well. They did give me quite a few peppers, bell peppers, but not as much as I would have hoped for. I really love bell peppers. We like to use it in our cooking, my boyfriend and I. We use it quite a bit, so it's a very useful plant for us, a very useful vegetable for us to be growing. So I thought I would give them an even bigger head start next year, not only with the hoop house, but if I kept these plants alive so that they would have all this root mass, all, of this plant mass already ready to go by the time it was hot enough, by the time the conditions were right enough here for them to really start thriving. So in late September, before our first frost, I pulled a few of these pepper plants. I believe I pulled 4 pepper plants of the bell pepper plants out of the ground in my hoop house. I just dug them up, got a bunch of the roots with me. I washed the roots off to get all the soil off. I didn't want to bring in anything that could potentially be harboring any pests or pest eggs. There were a lot of aphids on these plants, so I wanted to make sure they didn't come back inside. So I sprayed all the soil off of the roots. I clipped off all of the foliage, and I trimmed back the stems quite a bit. In fact, I trimmed them back even further than what you saw in that video, just because I figured that was too much. Then I sprayed all the plant material, the bare roots and the bare stems, with a horticultural oil, and I potted them up in some new potting mix, some fresh potting mix. And then I moved them into my garage where it stayed about 40 to 45 degrees. And so began my process of overwintering. I wanted to keep those plants dormant and not have to deal with them much at all. They wouldn't need very much watering, only before they got really dry. And they'd have enough sunlight, a few hours of sunlight every day from the windows on the doors of the garage. Now, as you can see from the plants in front of me, I've had mixed results. Not everything went according to what I had planned initially. Definitely my life sort of got turned a little bit upside down. Things were really difficult for me to deal with in my life. I think maybe if you've watched one of my older videos, I mentioned it. My younger brother passed away, and it was just something that I still don't really know how to talk about that, but it was definitely the most painful, the most difficult experience of my life. And a lot of things in my life sort of fell to the wayside. And I focused really on just getting through the days. My pepper plants were really at the bottom of my list of priorities. One thing I should mention is that just a little while before, maybe a week before my brother passed away, I decided I would pull my pepper plants out of the garage because I was just worried that they weren't getting enough sunlight there, and because I didn't really go there often, especially in the winter. I wanted to move them into my office where I was hoping that it would still stay cool. I set the temperature a little bit lower than I have in the other parts of the house, and I figured I would be able to keep a better eye on them there. So even if it was too warm, I would be able to water them, and I would just be seeing them all the time and sort of get an idea of what's going on with them and fix it from there. And then, yeah, all of that happened, and I really wasn't focusing on anything, especially not my pepper plants. So this one was the first to go. It just dried up. I just stopped watering these and paying attention to them, and this one I think, maybe just had a little bit less water held on to it. Maybe it was in a bit of a warmer spot. It was closer to the heat register. When I had found them and realized that, I wanted to try and save them, all of them were pretty dry, and this one just wasn't able to recover, so I just let this stay. I kept it in its pot. I just wanted to show you what it looks like. The two others had trouble from there. Both of them started leafing out after I had begun to water them again. Again, my office stayed a little bit warmer than I had hoped. When I was not feeling well, when I was upset going through all of that, I just cranked all of the heat up in my house. Anything I could do to make me feel better, even if it was physically, and my troubles were emotional and mental, I was just trying to do everything I could to feel okay. So I cranked the heat up in my house, and these pepper plants started to come to life again, which I didn't really want. So I pulled off the first few leaves that came out, and I continued to water it. I think maybe at that point I started paying too much attention to the plants, and I think what really got the other two was that I overwatered them, and they stayed a little bit wet for too long, and that sort of rotted out the roots. I was really hoping that maybe they would bounce back. The last leaf that I pulled off of one of those plants was not too long ago. It was quite recent, and I just thought, oh, I hope it does it one more time. I will leave any leaf that pops up and just try and let this plant survive. But lo and behold, nothing happened. So the other week I brought them out, I pulled them out. I wanted to just see what was going on, whether they dried out or rotted. None of the soil or mixture really smelled like anything was rotting. And I think it was because they had rotted at first and then they dried out, and either way, they were for sure dead. I would have definitely seen roots that were more plump, that were whiter, and not that dark yellow, brown, orange color. So for sure there was no life in them. I even tried to scrape off some of the wood on the side of the stems to see if there was anything, white or green on the inside, and it was all just very powdery and really dry and dead. You could definitely tell. So that's what all happened. That kind of explains the results that I have. What I do want to talk to you about were some of the things that I did right and some of the things that I did wrong, and how I want to change that for next year, and sort of looking forward what I'm going to do differently. So the things that I did right, I liked that I pruned out all the leaves. I liked that I put these plants into dormancy rather than try to keep them alive this whole winter. That just would have cost a lot in lighting bills. It would have taken a lot of space. I didn't have the time or energy, personally not this past winter, to deal with that. Barely had time to deal with plants that were dormant. What I also liked was that I removed all of the soil from the ground outside before I brought them in. I certainly didn't want to deal with pests. I know dealing with aphids indoors can be such a hassle. I know another channel that I follow, Mike the Chaotic Gardener, he dealt with aphids indoors, and it pretty much wiped out all of his pepper plants indoors, or maybe all of his plants. I'm so sorry that happened to you, Mike. I am very thankful that I didn't have to deal with that issue. So in addition to removing all of that soil from outside, I'm also happy that I sprayed the roots and the stems with neem oil or horticultural oil. I'm not quite sure which one I used. That again was another preventative measure for any pests that might pop up. And likewise then repotted it in fresh soil. This plant in particular had a lot more coco coir in the mix. I think I just ran out of potting soil that I was intending to use, and it did so much better. I think it was just the perfect amount to retain enough moisture that it needed, but had more drainage than the other potting mixes that I had used, so allowed the roots to not rot as easily. It might have been the only thing that really saved this one plant. And I liked the time that I brought them indoors. So late September, it was long enough that I didn't need to have them indoors for more than I needed to, and it was right before our first frost. Now for what I would do differently. I think first of all, I'm just more optimistic of doing this in the future. I think I will have just a better handle on it. I'll have a little bit more experience with how much water each plant needs and when. I think I would definitely keep them in the garage. I think it was unnecessary for me to move them up. And if I saw that maybe they needed a bit more light, then I would just have them up close to the fluorescent lights that are already in the garage. My boyfriend goes in and out of there enough that those lights just automatically come on, and I think that would be enough in addition to the sunlight, the little bit of sunlight that comes in through the windows on the doors. I would also create a schedule for myself to check up on them. Not something so extensive, but just maybe something that I can check off. This week I looked at them. This week I went down on a calendar or something, just a quick mark that I can do. So just so I can tell, that it hasn't been too long since the last time I checked on them. Now going back to the potting mixture, I would definitely be potting my plants up in a mixture that has a lot more coco coir in it. In fact, I bought a big 10-pound brick of coco coir, so hopefully I don't run out. Hopefully I'll just always have some on hand, particularly at that time of year when I'm putting things into storage for the winter. Something else I would do differently, and I saw this in one of the comments on my previous video, and I do agree, is I would trim the roots. I didn't need such long roots to be repotting them and bringing them into dormancy indoors. I think how it would help for sure was not having all the roots clumped up, not getting, this airy, fluffy, well-draining mixture in between all of those roots. It might cause the roots to rot more easily, having all those long, big roots clumped up like that. So just as a preventative measure to help myself out, I would trim the roots more. They don't need all those long roots. They'll be growing roots as soon as you pull them out of dormancy and as soon as they start really growing again. And what else I would do differently is I wouldn't let this pepper plant start leafing out until maybe mid to late March, when I start my other peppers from seed. It's just an extra amount of light that I have to keep on, of space under the lights rather, when I could be starting all my new seeds. So saving on some energy costs. This is still, I'm hoping, gonna go in the ground, so there's gonna be some transplant shock nonetheless, and it's gonna be even bigger, which might shock it even more. It's nice, honestly, having this pepper so big that I can look at, that I'm starting to go in and try and hand pollinate these flowers to get it to start producing now. But I do have to start fertilizing it now while it's indoors. A lot of upkeep that I wouldn't have had to do until much later if I had pulled these out of dormancy later. I let this come out of dormancy and just leaf out, really because I was afraid my other plants weren't looking good, and I just thought, for this one at least, while I tried to still prune off all the leaves on my other two plants that were alive at the time, I would let this go and see what happens, just to ensure that I have one plant alive by the end of this. And finally, the last thing that I would do differently would be to overwinter more of my plants. So hopefully that's what I'll be doing next winter or next fall, preparing for the winter, is pull out a lot more. And if they stay in the garage, it's really not taking up any space. I typically have a good amount of space in there over the winter. The space that I would normally use for seed starting, I can just use to keep these overwintered peppers, all the other tubers that I overwinter as well. This year, I guess my results, I ended up with 25% success. Now, I do come from a science background. I have a degree in molecular and cell biology in college, so I know I don't have enough data for that to be really a reliable metric of success. 1 out of 4 plants survived, especially because I didn't keep everything under the exact same conditions. But I think I did learn quite a bit just from observation, just from seeing what worked, the results from the things that were different, from my intuition of just growing plants over a few years now. I am very happy that I do have this one pepper plant. really just like makes me very happy to see. And every day there's more flowers blooming. You know, you do when you start seeds indoors, and when you get a plant like this, at least what I would do would be maybe to take the first few flowers off of your plant if it's way too early to be planting outside. And that's because it allows the new seedling to focus more on building out the roots, for leafing out, really creating a good infrastructure for it to produce a little bit later on when it's in better conditions outside. But for this special plant, my baby plant, I am just letting it flower all it wants. I will go ahead and give it fertilizer. If I think it needs to be potted up before, you know, everything's ready to go outside, then I'll pot it up. I have a lot of empty pots. I'm very grateful that it stayed alive this winter. And I just want to see really how much it can produce and how it will compare to the plants of the same variety. This is a King of the North plant, and I'll be planting more of those from seed again this year and just see how it compares. Although I am starting those seeds later, and also I'll only have one plant to be comparing to the other seedlings that I start. Hopefully, you know, it might give me an idea of how worthwhile it could be overwintering them and bringing it out of dormancy so early. Anyways, I think my voice is going. It's starting to crack. Thanks so much for watching this video and for, you know, sticking through it. Thanks for letting me talk a little bit about my experiences. Thanks for following along on this process. I'm very happy to be showing you these results, even if not all of it worked. I did find things that worked. I figured out what I'll be doing better in the future. And if you're not already subscribed, maybe you can consider it. I'll be showing just how this produces in comparison to my other plants that I start from seed. But that's all for this video. If you have any questions, let me know. I know a lot of people are interested in this process, and maybe I didn't cover absolutely everything, and maybe I can help you with some information that I have or some parts of my experience that I've been through. Thanks so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Bye. Whew. I have all my notes here.